At first, Iran relied on layered air defense. This means they have defenses at different levels to make it harder for the enemy to get in. Their plan was that if the defense was deep enough, the U.S. would be forced to use only stealth aircraft, like the F-35 Lightning II and B-2 Spirit. If other aircraft were used, they expected it would be easier to detect and shoot them down right away. But now that's no longer the case. Their defense is gradually losing its effectiveness, so the U.S. can now operate more freely, even without relying solely on stealth. The U.S. is now flying AH-64 Apache and A-10 Warthog aircraft inside Iran itself. These aren't stealth aircraft. They're slow and fly at low altitudes. But even so, they can get in and carry out attacks as if nothing is stopping them. But before we continue, please like this video. It really means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. According to Pete Hegseth, on March 26, the Apaches and A-10S can now freely operate inside Iran and even in the Strait of Hormuz. This means Iran no longer has enough defenses to stop them. That's how simple this is. If these kinds of aircraft can get in, it means the air defenses are already weak. You don't use this type of aircraft if the enemy is still strong. This is only used when there's almost nothing left that can stop it. And that's what happened. Because of Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion, Iran's defenses were almost destroyed. According to Ayal Zamir of the Israel Defense Forces, up to 80% of Iran's air defenses were no longer operational within just the first 24 hours of the attack. Only a few were left. So now, even basic attack aircraft can enter and attack directly. This used to be difficult. Now they can do it much more easily. Iran's problems with air defense didn't just start during Operation Epic Fury or Operation Roaring Lion. This has been an issue for a long time. As early as December 12, there were already reports saying that there were major gaps in Iran's defenses against Israel and even the U.S. It was former Iranian President Hassan Rouhani himself who said this directly. According to him, Iran's skies are now safe for the enemy and they almost have no capability left to stop them. He added that neighboring countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan are already under the control of the U.S. and Israel when it comes to airspace. This means that the enemy's positions are very close, allowing them to enter Iran even before the current operation began. And that's not all. During Operation Midnight Hammer in June, which led to the conflict between Iran and Israel, many of Iran's defenses were destroyed in just a few hours. So when Operation Epic Fury began, Iran's defenses were really no longer effective. According to a report by Army Technology, only about 100 air defense launchers were left in Iran. And most likely, not all of these can even use the different types of missiles they need against the U.S. This means they lack both equipment and capability, and even after several months, they haven't been able to restore it to its former strength. This is the reason why aircraft like the AH-64 Apache and A-10 Warthog can now enter and carry out direct attacks. If Iran's defenses were still strong, this wouldn't happen. For example, the Apache helicopter would be an easy target if there were proper defenses. It can only fly up to 20,000 feet. That's why it's within reach of many air defense systems, like the S-300 that Iran has. A system like this can hit targets even higher, up to around 19 miles in altitude. But even though Iran has this kind of equipment, they can't use it properly. So in simple terms, it's not because the U.S. aircraft are weak, but because Iran's defenses are already weak. The 19-mile range is for the newest version of the S-300. But even the older version of this can still hit targets that fly higher than what the AH-64 Apache can reach. So if Iran's defenses are still in good condition, the Apache shouldn't be able to get in. But they're still able to get in. That means Iran's defenses are really weak now. It's not totally gone, but it's no longer enough to stop the U.S. It's also true that not all of their defenses are gone. There are still some left, but it's not clear where they are or how effective they still are. According to Army recognition, the flight of the A-10 Warthog and Apache in the Strait of Hormuz is a sign that there are parts of the airspace already controlled by the U.S. In those areas, they can move freely because they are able to suppress Iran's remaining defenses using jamming, attacks, and support from nearby bases. As time goes by, this control grows even bigger. This is how these aircraft are used now. Based on what Pete Hegseth said, they often focus on the Strait of Hormuz. This is because many ships pass through here, and this is also where Iran uses small and fast boats to attack. This is where the A-10 comes in. The A-10 Warthog is built tough. It can fly low and has a powerful gun that can shred its target. It can quickly destroy Iran's fast attack boats. In simple terms, the A-10 is perfect for this kind of battle. And because Iran's defenses are already weak, the U.S. will use it not only at sea but also inside Iran to attack various targets. There's also a video where the A-10 Warthog used its cannon to destroy a base of a group allied with the USA. This means the A-10 is not only used at sea but also on land. In other attacks, it doesn't just use its cannon. It can also carry missiles and bombs that are fired from a distance. For example, it has the AGM-65 Maverick as well as laser-guided and GPS-guided bombs. The advantage of this is that it can attack even from far away from the target, making it safer against the remaining enemy defenses. It also carries the AM-9 Sidewinder. It can also shoot down drones or even old planes from Iran. In short, the A-10 is flexible. It can be used anywhere depending on what's needed. Yes, it still has weaknesses. If the enemy's defense is strong, it can also be hit easily, like the previously mentioned S-300 that can shoot down this kind of aircraft. But this is where U.S. control of the skies comes in. As long as the A-10 stays in areas controlled by the U.S. and Israel, it remains a powerful weapon capable of causing significant damage to its target. When it comes to the AH-64 Apache, it's not as flexible as the A-10, but it's still a powerful asset. It carries Hellfire missiles and a powerful chain gun. That's why it's suitable against Iran's fast boats. It has another advantage as well. It can hover or fly slowly. That's why it can guard and escort ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. There's still a risk if the enemy has strong defenses, because a helicopter is easier to hit compared to a jet. But for now, that's not a problem. The reason is simple. Iran no longer has enough capability to shoot these down. The whole situation is becoming clearer now. It's not just in the number of destroyed defenses that you can see how weak Iran is. The evidence is even clearer in what's actually happening. The U.S. is now able to enter Iran's airspace and carry out attacks with almost no resistance. This means they now have control of the air. Now the U.S. is carrying out intense attacks continuously, and it's not just being done by stealth aircraft. This also includes the A-10 Warthog and the AH-64 Apache, which provide sustained firepower, while other aircraft are carrying out more precise targeting. As of March 25, the U.S. has hit more than 10,000 targets inside Iran. This is significant, because what is being counted are the actual targets, not just the number of bombs or missiles. This means that a lot of places have been hit and affected. This can't be done by just a few planes. It requires a combination of different aircraft. The stealth jets are the ones carrying out the more precise attacks. Meanwhile, aircraft like the A-10 and other powerful planes help maintain pressure on the enemy. This has a significant impact on Iran. Leaders were falling one after another, including Ali Khamenei, who was among the first to be hit at the start of the operation. At the same time, according to the U.S., 92% of Iran's large ships are now out of commission. Their missile launches also dropped by 90% due to the continuous targeting of their launch sites. It's not just one part of the military that's being hit. Even command centers and places where weapons are made are affected. This means that not only is their ability to attack being weakened, but also their ability to plan and continue the fight. The A-10 Warthog also plays a big role in all of this. At sea, it helps together with the Apache to stop Iran's fast boats that are used against ships. On land, almost any target without enough defenses can be attacked. Because Iran's defenses are weak, it becomes easier for them to attack directly. especially in places where missiles are being launched. According to the Washington Post on March 29, at least 29 of Iran's missile launch sites have been completely destroyed since the operation began. This has a significant impact because it's the reason why the number of missile attacks by Iran has suddenly decreased in recent weeks. Overall, the U.S. is not just attacking, it is gradually removing Iran's ability to fight while maintaining control of the area. This is to ensure the operation continues. The U.S. is not only targeting missile launch sites, they are also destroying the very places where parts of Iran's ballistic missiles are being made. Iran has an entire network for this, and it is operated by the Iranian Ministry of Defense and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So far, 4 of the most important sites in this network have already been hit by the U.S. These include Sharud, Parchin, Qajir, and Hakimiyya. These sites produce fuel for missiles, so no matter how advanced the missile is, if it doesn't have fuel, it can't be used. This is why these sites are strategic targets. Because Iran's defenses are already weak, various U.S. aircraft can now fly in, including the A-10 Warthog, to directly attack these kinds of sites using bombs and long-range weapons. The role of the A-10 becomes even clearer here. It's not just being used now. It seems it was already involved in the U.S.'s early operations as well, where the remaining defenses of Iran were targeted. According to Army recognition, the U.S.'s first move is crucial to gain control of the air. That's why now, aircraft like the A-10 and Apache can move freely. At the start of Operation Epic Fury, stealth aircraft like the F-35 Lightning II-2B2 Spirit and F-22 Raptor were the first to be used. They were the ones who entered undetected and struck important targets. But that's not all. So what the U.S. did was combine this with cyber attacks and electronic warfare. This means they're not just destroying defenses, they're also weakening their ability to function. They did this by interfering with Iran's radar and sensors. They used different methods. This includes aircraft like the A-18 Growler, which can disrupt enemy signals. Because of this, there were moments when Iran's defenses weakened in certain areas. And during those moments, the U.S. was able to get in and carry out attacks more easily. Simply put, the U.S. didn't just use force. They combined technology, timing, and different methods of attack to gradually weaken Iran's defenses until it reached the point where it could hardly do anything to stop the attacks. Because of the combined cyber attacks and electronic warfare by the U.S., there were moments when Iran's defenses were weakened. It doesn't mean that they were completely disabled right away, but there were times when they didn't function properly. And at those very moments, that's when the U.S. came in. Here, they started using the A-10 Warthog, and later on, even the AH-64 Apache. What they did was simple but effective. They would go in, hit the target, and get out quickly before Iran's defenses could respond. This didn't just happen once, they kept doing it repeatedly. That's why Iran's remaining defenses were gradually depleted. There's another possible explanation that makes the situation clearer. As the defenses weakened due to cyber and electronic attacks, the A-10 was also used to directly destroy the remaining air defense units. This means that while Iran's radars and sensors were blind or weakened, that's when they were attacked. There's some irony in that. The aircraft that Iran's air defenses should have been able to shoot down actually became the very reason why those defenses were completely destroyed. And now the situation is different compared to before. The A-10 and Apache can now fly freely inside Iran. They are no longer easily stopped. This means the U.S. doesn't just have enough control of the skies to launch attacks, but it's almost total control. There are experts who say that this goes beyond simple control. One of them is David Petraeus, who also once led the United States Senate. According to him, at present, Iran's defense against aircraft is not much of a problem, as long as they don't fly too low. This means that the U.S. is now capable of sending aircraft and continuing sustained attacks. But even with this situation, there is still some caution. Not all threats have disappeared. There are still soldiers left who are armed with machine guns and shoulder-fired weapons. Even though this isn't as strong as their previous defenses, it can still cause harm if the aircraft aren't careful. That's why in their official statement, the U.S. still prefers to say they have air superiority rather than claiming they have total control. But if you look at what's actually happening, there's almost nothing stopping them. Aside from a few small threats, the U.S. can send almost any aircraft into Iran without being intercepted. The biggest thing Iran has managed to do in response is to damage an E-3 Sentinel. But this wasn't because of a direct hit from the air defense system. This happened because a base in Saudi Arabia was hit with a missile. To put it simply, they can't shoot down U.S. aircraft while they're in the air. Overall, what's happening is clear. According to Frank McKenzie, the U.S. is already achieving its objectives. And based on everything that's happening, you can see why. According to Frank McKenzie, it's clear that the U.S. has a plan that has been prepared for a long time and is now being continuously implemented. Most importantly, they have weakened Iran's air defenses to the point where you could say they almost control the skies over a large part of the country. Because of this, they had the opportunity to take the next step. They didn't just attack, but actively searched for and destroyed Iran's ballistic missiles. He wasn't the only one who said this. There was another former leader of the United States Central Command who also used the term air supremacy instead of air superiority. This means that even if the current U.S. leaders haven't said it directly, there are experts who believe that they almost have complete control of the skies. And this is where the next change in the battle begins. The U.S. will still continue its attacks from the air, but not as many as in the previous days. It's no longer necessary because most of Iran's important targets have already been hit. Now they are more focused on the remaining important targets. This includes places where ballistic missiles are launched, stored, and manufactured. And this is where the A-10 Warthog becomes important again. Because it can attack from a distance using its onboard weapons, it can enter safe airspace controlled by the U.S., strike its target, and immediately return. It no longer needs to stay long in dangerous areas. Meanwhile, other A-10S and AH-64 Apaches are focused on the Strait of Hormuz. There they confront Iran's fast boats that are used to block the passage of ships. According to the Wall Street Journal, these two aircraft are very important in the fight in the Strait of Hormuz, and they are the main reason why serious operations started there. But this won't end right away. It could take several weeks before the area is completely cleared of missile sites, boats, and other Iranian equipment. According to Duncan, the A-10S and Apaches are focused on the southern side of the strait. It's not just the U.S. that's taking action here. Even their allies are using Apaches to shoot down drones that only attack once. When you combine the A-10 Apache and other fighter jets, you can see how strong the U.S. force is in the area. It becomes more dangerous for Iran to continue blocking the Strait of Hormuz. But even so, it still hasn't been fully opened. There are still some ships that can pass through, but only a few. Donald Trump gave Iran until April 6th to fully open the strait. So in the coming days, it's likely that there will be more attacks from the A-10 and Apache. And each of those attacks is a reminder of how strong the U.S. forces are in this fight. The biggest question now is whether Iran will comply with what Donald Trump is demanding. If so, then it can be said that the A-10 Warthog and Apache have done their job. Because of the continuous attacks, Iran's capability in the Strait of Hormuz has weakened to the point where it has very few options left but to retreat. But if Iran does not surrender and continues to block the strait, that's when more serious measures would come into play. The U.S. could send ground troops. This is where the targets that have long been discussed will come in. They may target the islands in the Strait of Hormuz or Karg Island, which is one of the most important sources of Iran's income. If these places are hit, it's not just a simple attack. This will have a huge impact on Iran's ability to continue fighting, especially when it comes to money and control of the sea. And it's important to remember this isn't a sudden plan. The U.S. has been preparing for this kind of operation for a long time. This means that if it ever comes to the point where they need to send ground troops, they're already prepared for that. As time goes by, it becomes clearer that the course of the fight is no longer the same as it was at the beginning. Before, both sides had the ability to attack and defend at the same time, but now it's becoming more apparent who has more control over the situation. For Iran, each day is becoming more difficult. It's not just because of the attacks, but also because it's hard for them to recover quickly. When something is damaged, it can't be replaced right away. When a capability is lost, it takes longer to restore it. This also affects the speed of their decision-making. Instead of acting immediately, they prefer to wait and observe first. But while they're doing this, the U.S. continues to move forward. Meanwhile, the U.S. is operating more deliberately. They don't need to rush. They can choose the right time and the right target to attack. In this way, the balance of the fight gradually changes. This change doesn't happen suddenly. Instead, it's a gradual transfer of control from one side to the other. And as this continues, it becomes clearer where the situation is heading. As events continue, it becomes clearer that the fight is not over. There are still further steps that could change the situation at any time. In this situation, you can also see the effect on planning the next steps. It's no longer that easy for Iran to make quick decisions. They need to carefully think about every move because there's a possibility it could be hit right away. If their decision is too slow, they get left behind by the course of events. But if they rush, there's a risk of making mistakes. Because of this, they have a hard time finding the right balance. This also affects the movement of the equipment. They can't just move equipment or weapons without being noticed. Even a simple transfer needs to be carefully planned to avoid danger. On the other hand, the U.S. has more control over their movements. Their direction is clearer and decisions are made faster. Because of this, their actions are more sustained and organized. In this way, the situation gradually changes. It's not sudden, but the change becomes noticeable over time. And with each passing day, it becomes clearer who has more control over what's happening. For now, the effects of the attacks can be seen not only on major targets. Even the daily activities inside Iran are already being affected. It may not be immediately obvious, but it's felt in the movement of people and equipment. When a road, bridge, or building is damaged, they have a hard time transporting supplies and equipment. Because of this, it takes longer for the needed supplies and equipment to arrive. Even if there are still weapons or equipment left, their usefulness becomes limited if they don't reach the right place at the right time. This means it's not enough to have something if you can't use it when needed. This also affects the issuing of orders. When there are problems with communication, the flow of information slows down. Even if the plan is clear, if the orders are delayed, the movements of those in the field are affected. Gradually, these problems accumulate. It may not be a big event on its own, but when combined, it has a significant effect overall. On the other hand, the U.S. operates more efficiently. The flow of information is faster, and the direction of their actions is clearer. Because of this, their actions become more organized. This shows that strength is not the only basis for the fight. How fast and organized you move is also important. As events unfold, it becomes clearer that the fight is not just measured by momentum. And when someone gets hit, you can also see it in how difficult it is for one side to keep their operations organized. When the situation starts to get chaotic, it becomes harder to fix. Even if there is still capability, its effect is reduced because it is no longer being used properly. Because of this, it becomes clearer why the pressure on Iran continues. It's not just because of the attacks, but also because they are having a hard time operating properly. In the end, it becomes harder for them to restore the situation to how it was before.